You ever have one of those weeks where it feels like the universe is just messing with you? Not in some grand, tragic way. No, that would be too dramatic. I'm talking about the kind of petty, passive-aggressive chaos that starts with a single, tiny sound, like a drip. That's how it began for me. Just drip. One drop of water hitting concrete, over and over again. Like a metronome from hell. I'd inherited this old house from my great-uncle Walter, this Cold War-era bunker of a place in a sleepy little HOA community called Maple Hollow. It was one of those neighborhoods where every house looks like it was printed off the same template, and the people wave at you with just enough warmth to remind you it's a rule, not a choice. Uncle Walt was a different breed. He was a doomsday prepper before it was trendy, ham radio operator, conspiracy theorist, the whole deal. He left the house to me after he passed. And even though it smelled like mothballs and despair, I couldn't bring myself to sell it. Felt like there was history here. Real, weird, slightly paranoid history. Anyway, the drip. That sound drilled into my brain for days. I couldn't sleep, couldn't work. I'm a graphic designer, so I mostly work from home, and every time I sat down to focus, drip. I finally snapped on day 4, told myself I was going to do the adult thing, called a plumber, guy named Dave from D&J Plumbing. We get in your pipes. Which honestly sounded vaguely threatening, but had good reviews. That same day, while I was out inspecting the rusty old Bilco doors that led to the basement, coffee in hand, contemplating whether tetanus was included with every step down there, she appeared. Like a scene out of a horror movie, dressed in beige and wielding a clipboard like a holy relic. "Mitchell." "Is it?" she said, voice crisp like she ironed it that morning. "It's just Mitch," I replied, wary. "Dolores Granger," she said, sticking out her hand. "President of the Maple Hollow HOA. Just thought I'd stop by and welcome you to the community and, address a few compliance concerns." Ah, there it is. She launched into a list of violations so precise it felt like she'd been surveilling me. Brass half an inch too high. A commercial vehicle in my driveway, aka Dave's van, which hadn't even arrived yet. And then she pointed, with a look of utter disgust, at the Bilco doors. "And that unsightly access structure," she said, like she was describing a bodily rash. "It breaks visual harmony with the neighborhood aesthetic. It's discordant." "Ma'am," I said, trying not to laugh, "it's a basement door." She smiled like a snake that just got promoted. "Yes. And per bylaw 12B, Section C, all modifications, including access structures, must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. And I don't believe this portal has been." She said portal like it led to Narnia and not my flooded laundry room. I figured that was the end of it, until the next morning when I heard the scrape of shovels. Looked out the window, and they were doing it. A landscaping crew, HOA sanctioned, was burying my basement entrance under a foot of dirt and fresh sod. No warning, no conversation. Just turf warfare, literally. I ran outside in my pajamas, yelling like a madman, but they just shrugged. "Work order from the committee," they said. "Talk to your HOA." So I did. I tried to call Dolores. Straight to voicemail. Her message said, and I quote, "For all HOA inquiries, please refer to the community binder. For emergencies, dial 911. Have a uniform day." I called the HOA management company. They were about as helpful as a wet paper towel. I even called the police, and the dispatcher, bless her, said, "Sir, your neighbor is putting grass on your door." Yeah, that didn't go far. By the time Dave arrived with his apprentice Josh, a Gen Z kid who looked like he'd rather be watching TikToks about this situation than fixing it, the entrance was completely buried. Dave took one look, shook his head, and said, "I've seen a lot of weird plumbing jobs in my day, but this is some Kafka-level HOA nonsense." I laughed, but I was dying inside. The leak was getting worse. I could hear it through the walls now. Drip, drip, like my sanity ticking away one drop at a time. Then I remembered something. A dusty old cardboard tube I found when I first moved in. Blueprints. Uncle Walt's original house plans from 1961. I dug them out, unrolled them across my kitchen table, and there it was, a room labeled P.S. Personal shelter, and a dotted line, a secret passage leading from the study to somewhere deep under the house. I stared at my bookshelf, this massive wooden beast crammed with my great-uncle's survival guides and Cold War fiction. I ran my fingers along the back, pushed nothing. Pushed harder, still nothing. Then I shoulder-checked it, and with a low creak, it swung open. Behind it, stairs. Concrete. Dusty. Cold. I grabbed my flashlight and descended like Indiana Jones, but with worse posture. At the bottom was a time capsule. Shelves of canned food, peaches, beans, Spam. A Geiger counter. Hand crank radio. 3 military-style cots. Uncle Walt wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. And there on the far side was a steel hatch. Big crank handle. I turned it with both hands, felt the bolts give, and opened it into the back of my basement. There it was, the source of the drip. A busted pipe, gleaming in the flashlight like it was mocking me. But I'd made it. I called Dave again. Don't ask how, I said. Just bring your tools. And maybe park a block away. Wouldn't want to offend the neighborhood with your van's commercial vibes. When he and Josh showed up, I led them through the house, into the study, swung open the bookshelf like it was no big deal. Josh dropped his earbuds. Dave stared into the dark tunnel and said, "Kid, I've unclogged pipes in prison cells and porta potties, but I ain't never fixed one through a bomb shelter." We got to work. They cut the pipe, patched it up, leak fixed. Victory, right? Except, the noise from the saw must have rattled the bricks, because 10 minutes later there's banging on my front door. And not just polite HOA banging. This was cop knock. I opened the door to Officers Rivera and Marks. Rivera had the look of a man who'd seen too much suburbia, and Marks looked like he was still figuring out how to turn on his body cam. "Sir," Rivera said, "we got a report from a neighbor, claims you're running an illegal tunnel or some kind of underground operation." I just smiled. "Fellas, you want to see something wild?" I brought them through the house, into the study, pushed open the shelf. Rivera didn't say a word for a full 30 seconds. Marks whispered, Is this a bat cave?" They followed me down into the bunker. Rivera stood there, surrounded by cans of beans and military cots, just absorbing. Finally, he said, "I once had to taste a guy dressed as a wizard at a 4th of July barbecue, but this tops it. And over here," I said, opening the steel hatch, "is the basement. The leak. The reason Dave's here." We walked up. Dave waved. "Howdy, officers. Just patching pipes. Not smuggling plutonium, I promise." The cops laughed. It was over, right? Not quite. When we stepped outside, there she was, Dolores, standing on her lawn like a suburban gargoyle, eyes blazing, ready for her big reveal. "Well," she asked, "are you arresting him?" Rivera didn't even blink. "Ma'am, your neighbor has a bomb shelter, not a meth lab. Also, you illegally buried his only basement access. Might want to look into that violation." Her face went through all 7 stages of grief at once. Marks added, "He's got Spam from the 70s down there. It's awesome." Next morning, the landscapers were back, only this time, they were unburying my doors. Quietly. Shamefully. The HOA covered the cost. Word on the street is Dolores has since stepped back from her role due to stress. That fall, I got a note from the new HOA president, Gary. The guy with the obnoxiously loud leaf blower. It was an invite to the neighborhood barbecue. Tucked inside was a post-it that read, "If a mushroom cloud ever shows up, we're all meeting at your place." Yeah, I kept that one on my fridge. So that's how a leaky pipe, a buried door, and a Cold War bomb shelter taught me how to survive not just a disaster, but a homeowners association with too much time and not enough perspective. And if you've ever dealt with a HOA Karen, or been one, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below, let me know. Who's in the right when it comes to private property, community rules, and a man's right to access his own basement? And hey, if you ever find yourself losing sleep over a leaky pipe, maybe check behind your bookshelf first. You never know what kind of history you're standing on.